So guys, we're going to learn the basic and introduction of web application hacking. So the very first part we're going to learn is web application hacking, which is like the basic part. So in this part we're going to understand the web application security, then client based and browser based web application security, then exploitation web application or exploiting the web application, whichever way you like. And we're going to learn the more of the web application hacking, and then we're going to learn the reconnaissance part, which is for the footprinting. So in this part we're going to learn the identifying the vulnerable target with showdown, banner grabbing using wget, and we will also use the demonstration, nmap netsparker, which will be demonstration using the Kali Linux machine, artifacts with Econetics, and then the end we are going to learn the Babsuit traversal. The next part is the web application, which is for the tampering. So in this part we are going to learn the OWSP and top 10 application security risk. After that we are going to learn the parameter tampering, cookie poisoning, and we will understand the untrusted data, how this is works, and the hidden field tampering, and at the end we are going to learn the mass assignment attack. And the next part is involving clients using the attack. So we're gonna use like couple of cross-site scripting attack in this involving client part. So the first one is the reflected cross-site scripting, which is we all know XSS, and then we're going to use the second part and we're going to learn the persistent cross-site scripting, then cross-site request forgery, which is in short like CSRF, and at the end we're going to learn the involving clients for web application hacking. And the next part is identity management and access control attacks. So in this part we're going to learn the weaknesses in identity management, hacking using like remember me feature, insufficient access control, and privilege elevation. So, and that's we are going to learn about this like web application hacking, and at the very end we are going to, as usual, know and learn the real world example of hacking web application with a demonstration.
Hello there. So let's talk about web application security, understanding each and every little thing of it. The state of web application security, from sophisticated e-commerce engines to cloud-based productivity solutions and personal tools on mobile phones, web applications power how things get done. Organizations around the globe rely on them for connections to customers, business partners, suppliers, and staffs. To better understand the challenges that organizations face to product web applications, Redwire commissioned a second annual global survey of senior executives and IT professionals at companies with worldwide operations. The goal of the survey was to find out how security breaches have affected respondents. organizations in the past 12 months or 1 year, and the impact of application attacks on plans for cybersecurity protection measures. The result painted a picture of what's common to companies around the world, as well as in three regions: Asia Pacific, APAC, the Americas, AMER, and the Europe Middle East. So, getting started with web app security. So, there is some module object, like first one, understanding web application security. Common web application security vulnerabilities, web application penetration methodologies, import manipulation, authentication and session management. So tools used: Linux, Tailport Pro, Black Widow, Webslate, counter measures. So here is a overview, like applications connected each other with the internet, web application, and internet connected with application security, each other connected with security, and application servers only connected with application security, then application security connect with internet, then applications. So there is some method, HTTP method and resource URL. So what is the resource URL? I'm talking it in previous video. And description, actually how all these three things connected: HTTP method, get post, resource users, then gets lists of users. Again, HTTP method get users password and gets a user identified by 1234 or anything, and post users creates a new user, and put users 1234 updates a user identified by 1234. Then that can be delete or update. It's a feature. So look in this picture: a URL, then a parameter, then a parameter value, query string begin, equal sign. So what is routing? In routing is the process of moving a packet of data from source to destination. The principles of routing can apply to many networks, such as circuit switched networks and computer networks. Routing is typically performed by a specialized device known as a router. Routing is a core feature of the internet, where the router selects the paths of internet protocol IP packets to travel from their origin to the destination. The routing process performed by a router typically directs forwarding on the basis of routing tables, which maintain a record of the routes to various network destinations. A routing table can be compared to a train timetable, where train passengers consult the timetable to decide which train to catch. Routing tables function is the same way, but the network paths rather than trains. These tables may be specified by an administrator, learned by observing network traffic, or built with the assistance of routing protocols. How routing works actually? When a router receives a packet, it reads the headers of the packet to see its intended destination. It then determines where to route the packet based on information in its routing table. As a packet travels to its destination, it may be routed multiple times by several routes. Routers perform times a second with a million of packets. So, this is how routing works and what is routing. So, thank you. Hello everyone. So, today's topic is client based and browser based web application security. So, let's go to a website first. hackyourselffast.tryhand.com. In Kali Linux, in any browser, just go hackyourselffast.tryhand.com. Just see the interfaces. So, here is login, register. So, what I need? I need source code of this register page. So this is source code of register page, or how it built or connected page. See all the HTML files and code in your hand. So this is script. Here's password label, password field, username field. If you have this kind of information in your hand and you want to damage or hack this website, you can easily do it. Then I need this page information. Just have a look. All the code do by a developer, completed code is here. So if I need interface source code, look, here is navbar container, how the page is created, all the information is here. However, it is also true that none of them are actually safe from security threats. In fact, website browsers are more prone to security vulnerabilities, and when users interact with websites, it holds possibilities of malware and other threats in it. Taking this into consideration, below are some most common browser security threats and how to protect your system against them. Removing saved login credentials. Bookmarks. Bookmarks paired with saved logins for the associated sites are a very bad combination and does not really favor your system. When such is done, a hacker with even minimal knowledge can hack it. There are some websites that use two-factor authentication like texting OTPs to your mobile phone for access. However, a lot of them take into use this as a one-time access code so that a person is able to confirm his identity on the system it is being intended to be connected from. Deleting safe credential is not good for your browser as well as your overall system. So, permission to browser history. The browsing history of a browser is short of a map or tracing mechanism of what you do and which sites you visit. It does not only tell what sites you visited but also for how long and when to. If a criminal wishes to obtain your credentials from the sites you access, he can easily do it, knowing which sites you access through the browsing history. And another one is cookies. Cookies that consist of stored local files and which determines the link of certain files are another common browser security threat. Similar to the browsing history, It can also trace what site you visit and obtain the credentials. Browser cache. The browser cache consists of starting sections of website pages which makes accessing and loading of the sites easier and quick. Every time you visit search can also identify which site or post portal you have exited and what content you have gone through. It also saves your location and device discovery, making it a top common browser security threats with its solution. The following are the list of the top common online web browser security risks: harvesting saved login credentials, browser extensions and plugins, browser cache, analyzing cookies, obtaining autofill information. So some phishing sites, invalid SSL certificates, weak cryptography, mixed content, and reflected cross-site scripting. Its vulnerabilities. So saved login credentials. It is recommended to save the credentials in the browser. Instead, use password manages like password save and KeePass to store credentials. Password managers operate through a central master password and help you save your website password securely. You can also customize the manager to access a safe login or URL as per your convenience and security reasons. Removable browsing history is obviously need. Deleting the browser cache is a way to remove risk information, especially when engaged in confidential activities like online banking. This step can be performed manually in a browser or set to automatic like when closing the browser. Hello there. So in this section we'll explain what SQL injection is, some common examples. So what is SQL injection? The first question. SQL injection is a web security vulnerability that allows an attacker to interfere with the queries that an application makes to its database. It generally allows an attacker to view data that they are not normally able to retrieve. So look at this picture. SQL injection, how it works. A HTTP request and return to database and web API server related attacker and database. This might include data belonging to other users. An SQL query is more of an application interacting with database. An SQL injection occurs when an application fails to sanitize the user input data. An attacker can use specially crafted SQL commands to control web applications database server. This might include data belonging to other users or any other data that the application itself is able to access. In many cases, an attacker can modify or delete this data, causing precedent changes to applications content or behavior. In some situations, an attacker can escalate an SQL injection to compromise the server or other backend infrastructure or perform a denial of service attack, DOS attack. So SQL injection, select from table where user and password. What is the actually impact of successful SQL injection attack? A successful SQL injection attack can result in authorized access to sensitive data such as password, credit and details or personal user information. Many high-profile data breaches in recent years have been the result of SQL injection attacks, leading to reputational damage and regularly fines. In some cases, an attacker can obtain. So let's go to a website altromutual.com and try to go their admin login page. In some cases, an attacker can obtain a precedent backdoor into an organization's systems, leading to a long-term compromise that can go unnoticed for an extended period. So let's check. Give a wrong password first. There are a wide variety of SQL injection vulnerabilities, attacks, and techniques which arise in different situations. Some common SQL injection examples is retrieving hidden data and subverting application logic. And union attacks, examining the database, blind SQL injection. So let's try. Retrieving hidden data. Now we try retrieving hidden data, where you can modify an SQL query to return additional results. So let's write the username or 1 equal 1 minus minus. And give the same password here and try to log in. Okay, the admin interface is here. Look at this. Hello admin user, welcome to Alberto Mutual Online. View account details. If now I click go, then we can open admin panel in ultramutual. So, subverting application logic, you can change the query to interface with the application's logic, and union attacks, where you can retrieve data from different database tables, examining the database, where you can extract information about the version and the structure of the database, and blind SQL injection, where the results of a query you control are not returned in the application's response. The SQL query asks the database to return all details. SQL injection attacks are a type of flaw in the code of websites and web apps that allows cyber attackers to hijack backend process and access, extract, and delete confidential information from your databases. Use robust testing tools like dynamic analysis that look at the app from the outside in, and static analysis (SAST) that searches for vulnerabilities at the code level. Look for areas where your app connects to a database and try to pass unusual values as a test. 27.8% of applications have SQL injection vulnerabilities on initial scan. So this is enough information for SQL injection. Hello there. So web penetration testing, web application penetrations testing, lab setup. So today I will talk about Burp Suite Community Edition, and this tutorial will introduce Burp Suite and demonstrate the common modules and tools used by the web applications. Burp Suite is an integrated platform for attacking web applications. It contains a variety of tools with numerous interfaces between them designed to facilitate and speed up the process of attacking an application. All of the tools share the same framework for handling and displaying HTTP messages. Persistence, authentication, proxies, logging, alerting, and extensibility. There is a limited free version and also Burp Suite professional. By web application hackers to find and exploit vulnerabilities. This tutorial provides practical examples through the Portswingle Labs data to help solidify and concepts give you the opportunity to exploit system. Throughout this tutorial, you guys learn techniques that hackers use to attack and penetrate computers and networks. You will learn cybersecurity, you will learn ethical hacking, penetration testing, and burp suite. You guys also discover just how easy a cybercriminal could break into your own network. So let's open Kali Linux and web application analysis. Here is many options like burp suite, comics, keyfix, digital map, WP scan, zap, and web vulnerability scanners, cadaver, Nikto, Skifish, DevTest, WebT, WhatWeb, and web crawlers and directory, DRB, Curicapt. Here is built-in app application in Kali Linux. So here I open my burp suite community edition. So they call it for update this application. So here is some options: temporary project, new project, and open existing project. So new project on disk can't be complete because this is not professional version. So I select temporary and burp defaults setup. So starting the project. How you guys can open burp application? So here is the dashboard. Of burp suite community edition. I open it as a temporary project. So here is dashboard, target, proxy, intruder. Here you can set host and port, repeater, request again and sequence. Then here is a decoder, compare, extruder, project options and user options. It's really a simple application. So here is some links for home test lab. Pen test build for Kali Linux includes SQL map, www.kali.org, intercepting proxy burp suite free edition, and midmap for pen test lab software. After understanding how a hacker thinks and performs an attack, you guys will instantly be able to better defend your own computer and network from hackers. You guys learn the importance of security along the highly desired skills that could boost your career. How would you like to land a job that pays you ethically hack and perform penetration tests from your very own house? So that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Bye guys. Hello there. So today's topic is identifying vulnerable target with Shodan. So first, Shodan is a search engine that lets users search for various types of servers connected to the internet. So let's go their website. Shodan, just simple search it on Google, and it is a search engine for the internet of everything. Shodan is the world's first search engine for internet connected devices. Discover low internet intelligence can help you more. So this is the official Shodan website. Here you can log in connected website. Node.js, Python, PHP is their core languages. Developer chose the entire Shodan platform. IP lookups, searching data, streaming is available, is there. So here's another option: maps, images, monitor, developer. So what is Shodan actually? Some have described Shodan as a search engine for hackers and have even called it the world's most dangerous search engine. It was developed by John Matherly in 2009, and unlike other search engines, it looks for specific information that can be invaluable to hackers. Shodan pulls service banners from servers and devices on the web, mostly port 80, but also ports 21, 22, 23, 161 and 5060. So what can Shodan show us? Since almost every new device now has a web interface to remote management, we can access innumerable web-enabled servers, network devices, home security systems, and many more. Shodan can find us webcams, traffic signal, video projectors, routers, home heating systems, and SCADA systems that, for instance, control nuclear power plants and electrical grids. If it has web interface, Shodan can find it. What a strongest process is completed by Shodan. You guys just use it. So now, what is Shodan used for? This is a search engine software like Google, and this only works with the internet connected device. Okay, it is just similar as Google or Yahoo or Bing, anyone, any website, any search engine like this. Shodan can find anything when it is connected to the internet. If any chance internet is not protected, Shodan tells hackers that there's something that is breaking the network. The hackers do not design Shodan and they does not use it. This is mainly to get used by cybersecurity experts who help to protect individuals, public utilities, enterprise, and much more. Whenever you search for anything in Shodan, it will make you see if there is anything publicly available or not. But you need to understand that searching for something in Shodan is complicated compared to Google search. It is actually advanced options for advanced technology, for advanced data you can find by searching in Shodan. So first you need to create a account in Shodan. So how you can create? First you need start by navigating Soren's official site, and you will get great by opening screen as below. Before you start work, you need to register by using its feature. If you want to advanced feature, then you need to get paid for it. Search on Sodan. As soon as we register, we can do the custom search or do the search directory. After that, you can see if you have any standard recent searches.
Hello everyone, so in this lecture we'll learn about external vulnerability scanning like Sudan, Corellis or Nmap. So let's talk about what is vulnerability scanning. So vulnerability scanning is like assessment of computer systems, networks and or application for weaknesses that can be exploited by unauthorized person and potentially results in a loss of confidentiality, integrity or availability. So you may have a question like reasons, what is the reasons that we need to do for vulnerability scan? Like vulnerability scan can do monitor compliance, determine where to focus your resources, quantify risk for the management or organizations, and identify vulnerable component to your network and then research the planning. So let's talk about now common scanning tools. So there are a couple of tools like first as usual that we previously talked a lot of times, which is Nmap, then Nessus, then Qualys, and at the end which we will be talking about now is Sodan. So let's talk a bit about Sodan. So Sodan is a search engine of internet connection devices which is created by John Matherly, and it's launched on like in 2009 March I think, and you can visit by simply going to this website which is www.sodan.io. And a good thing about Sodan is that it is free, and or I think is very inexpensive, and the best thing about is that it is very simple to use, and which is web's UI, and it has like command line tools. Then it can use like DuckDuckGo, which is best. I think what's the word? I think DuckDuckGo is the best private or anonymous search engine, so which also uses bank syntax so by Sodan, and it has API, and also it has enterprise accounts are all available in Sodan. So let's talk about Sodan's advantages. So what are the advantages? Why should you use Sodan? So Sodan is fast. I mean, it's by speed. So its scanning takes time, and its sequential scanning can fail, and also long detail often is required. So let's start then objective. So you don't need no inside knowledge, and also it's uniform the scanning technique. Then Sodan is like no organizational bias, and Sodan has no inadvertent whistling, and also it is random and non-incremental scanning. And the most important thing is free or inexpensive. So it has free unfiltered searches without any account, and then it has free filter searches with account, and it can report an API with a paid account like $40 or $50 on one time. Then you can use like report and other APIs. Then for the enterprises account, it starts with $19 per month. So what data returned by Solan? So it first returned as a banner text, then operating system that the service are running on the system, then the version, and roughly equivalent to curl comment, which is like this. So let's now talk about internal versus external scan. What is this? So internal scan originate from a privileged host or villain which is inside the firewall. Then external scan originate from the internet which is outside the firewall. So that's all about the Southern and external vulnerability scanning. And as we all know what Nmap is, so we're not going to go through that.
Hey there, today I will talk about NetSparker and Nmap Basic. So this is the website for downloading NetSparker. So simply click download. There is another version of web version of NetSparker, and one is tool and another one is web version. So I downloaded it. Wait some time for downloading. NetSparker Professional. NetSparker is an industry-leading web application security solution that automatically scans custom web applications for cross-site scripting, XSS, SQL injection, and other types of vulnerabilities. The NetSparker web application security solution uses a proprietary prop-based scanning technology that automatically verifies the identified vulnerabilities by exploiting them in a safe and read-only way. So this is the web version of NetSparker. And scan policy, there is several steps for scan policy, and additional websites. Here a box for imported links, and URL rewrite, create PA scan, and this is the from. Since most of the post-scan processes are being automated, businesses can scale up their application security ports. In fact, when the proof-based scanning technology is paired with the built-in workflow tools of NetSparker, enterprises have a closed-loop web application security solution suite that allows them to ensure the long-term security of all their web applications from the early stages of development until the production environment. NetSparker also has a fully documented REST API that allows business to integrate automated web application security scanning in their SDLC and DevOps processes, thus can identify vulnerabilities even during the early stages of development. So scan policy optimizer, there is 8-step: general information, operating system, web server, application server, database server, web application, and then go to your Linux terminal and root user and give command apt get update and wait for some time. The installation program or the terminal is working, so you have to wait some time. About the total procedure, now give command apt get install alien. Now you guys can find all of these texts by giving the alien command. This is all for Nmap installation. Again needs some time. Now the machine reading database. Simply click yes and restart. Dashboard, give commands in command box nmap capital F P N N and new profile. Give a profile name discover scan. Select the profile and in target box give a target. Here I give 192.168.1.0/24. Hello everyone. So today I'll talk about Aquantics. Aquantics. So how it install on Windows, installation on Windows process. Okay. Step 1. Download the latest version, Windows version of Aquantics from the download location provided when you purchased the license, or you can download it on search by Google and the demo user. You can download it. Double click the installation file to launch the Aquantics installation wizard and click next when prompted. Review and accept the license agreement. Provide credentials for the administrative user account. These will be used to access and configure Aquantics. Configure how the Aquantics web UI is accessed and if remote UI access is allowed. Review the installation tasks and click install to start the installation. Setup will now copy all files and install the Aquantics service. This is how you can install on Windows. You can install Aquantics in any operating system like Linux, Mac. Okay, now how you can install it on a Linux? Installation on Linux in Aquantics. Download the latest Linux version of Aquantics from the download location provided when you purchase a license, as Windows system. Then open a terminal window. Everyone knows that Linux only start or all the work is done by terminal. Use chmod to add executable permissions on the installation file. Then run the installation. In case there are dependencies missing, see the notes section. Review and accept the license agreement. Configure the host name which will be used to access the Aquantics user interfaces. Provide credentials for the administrative user account. These will be used for access. So here is a overview to find what other scanners don't do, but Aquantics do this critical thing. Aquantics isn't your typical web vulnerability scanner. Whatever your web presence, Aquantics has what it takes to manage the security of all your assets. Detect over 7,000 vulnerabilities, including SQL injections, XSS, misconfigurations, weak passwords, exposed databases, and out of band vulnerabilities. Scan all pages, web apps, and complex web applications, including single page applications with lots of HTML5 and JavaScript. Single page means like uh, JavaScript and library. So better results in less time. Get proof that vulnerabilities are real and not false positive, and have Aquantics access the severity of the issue, giving you immediately actionable insights. Intuitive and easy to use, Aquantics elements lengthy setup and onboarding times, you can get set up and start scanning in just a few clicks. Aquantix verifies which vulnerabilities are real, freeing your team from chasing down false positives, saves time with lightning fast scans that find key vulnerabilities immediately and don't hug your network or overload your servers. So April 2020, high vulnerabilities, medium vulnerabilities and low vulnerabilities. It's a chart. So let's check Aquantix. This is a setup and scan wizard. Here your targeted website URL. Here so you can scan a single website. In case you want to scan a single web application and not the whole site, you can enter the full path below. The application supports HTTP and HTTPS websites. So give our targeted websites URL and targeted information. Our targeted website is hackyourselffast.tryhard.com and port 80, operating system Windows. So here is the dashboard of Aquantix and as scan results. So in web scanner, main option is here, main tools. Git metadata directory was found in this folder. An attacker can extract sensitive information by requesting the hidden metadata directory that version control tool Git creates. So here is all the scan result. HTML from without CSRF protection and error message, cross-site scripting, application error message, blind SQL injection, cross-site scripting and Git repository was found. So this is how Aquantix work and its feature, and I show you guys how you can download it and install it on your Windows or Mac operating system or Linux operating system. So that's it for today. Thank you all. Hello there. So today I'll talk about Burp Suite. Burp Suite is an integrated platform for performing security testing of web applications. Its various tools work seamlessly together to support the entire testing process from initial mapping and analysis of an application's attack surface through to find out and exploiting security vulnerabilities. Burp gives you full control, letting you combine advanced manual techniques with state-of-art automation to make your work faster, more effective, and more fun. So it's actually proxy scanner, intruder, and repeater. This is the web's Burp Suite dashboard. Like any security testing software, Burp Suite contains functionality that can damage target systems. Testing for security flaws inherently involves interacting with targets in non-standard ways that can cause problems in some vulnerabilities targets. You should take due care when using Burp. Read all documentation before use. So this is target hand and proxy. It's actually gate method. So send this to intruder. Intruder host address is hackerfirstself.trahan.com and port 80 and positions. Burp Scanner is a tool for performing automated scans of websites. Let's check this get method. And add more 5 for proxy. The work involved in performing a scan comprises two key phases. One is crawling for content. This involves navigating around the application, following links, submitting forms, and logging in where necessary to catalog the content. And another one is auditing for vulnerabilities. This involves analyzing the application's traffic and behavior to identify security vulnerabilities. So this is the information about targeted host. So you see all the personal deployment keys, ACI, all the information, all the data is stored in database, and we proxy its payloads. So load and lock in. You can define one or more payload sets. The number of payload sets depend on the attack type defined in the position tab. So a message: the free edition of Burp contains a demo version of Burp Intruder. Some functionality is disabled, and attacks are time throttled. Please visit their visit for their professional suite, which contains full version, but it a free version. So this is how can you guys use Burp suite. So some extra browsing history or attacks is forced browsing, and how you guys can avoid forced browsing. To avoid forced browsing attacks, the developer must never assume that simple solutions are enough for application data security. The developer must never assume that a publicly accessible URL is impossible to find. If it exists, it can be found. Authentication is a must. The developer must never assume that once the user is authenticated, they don't need any other access control. For every web page that is accessed, the developer must take sure that the authenticated user is authorized to access the content. To discover potential vulnerabilities, you should employ efficient automated web application vulnerability scanning using tools such as Acquaintix. This will help you find most problems very quickly and eliminate them before an attacker can exploit them. You should also follow up with manual pattern testing to find issues difficult to discover automatically, such as forced browsing. So this is how you guys can stop forced browsing or avoid forced browsing, and use Acquaintix for your browser's safety or attack any targeted website or hack any website. Hello there. Hope you guys are well. So today's topic is OWASP, Open Web Application Security Project and top 10 application security risk. So what is OWASP top 10? OWASP Top 10 is an online document on OWASP's website that provides a ranking of and remediation guidance for the top 10 most critical web application security risks. The report is based on a consequence among security experts from around the world. The risks are ranked and based on the frequency of discovered security defects, the severity of the vulnerabilities, and the magnitude of their potential impacts. The purpose of the report is to offer developers and web application security professionals insight into the most prevalent security risks to the main incorporate the report's findings and recommendations into the security practices, thereby minimizing the presence of these known risks in their own applications. So it is WASP basically, and the top 10 risk. So OWASP top 10 in 2013 and 2017. Their difference: A1 injection, broken authentication and session management, broken authentication, cross-site scripting XSS in 2013, and sensitive data exposure in 2017. Insecure direct object references in 2013, and XML internal entities XXE is a new feature added in 2017. Then security misconfiguration and broken across control merged 2017 version. Then missing function level access and cross-site scripting XSS, it merged, and a new feature cross-site request forgery CSRF and cross-site scripting using components with known vulnerabilities. Components with known vulnerabilities, it same, and unvalidated redirects and forwards, and insufficient logging and monitoring. So new community, these are new feature and new update. So some untrusted data, understanding some untrusted data, request body, request headers, query string, and URL route, HTTP verbs, external services. All of them are untrusted data in a web application or web browser, you can say as well. So a browser read this data in a untrusted data, then give you a message about secure your website or secure your browsing. So where untrusted data is used, XSS I discussed last time. Server client stored, the database is stored in the XSS, server stored server's XSS, and client stored client XSS. So past XSS defensive strategies: all untrusted data must first be canonicized, reduced to simplest form. All untrusted data must be validated, positive regular expressions, blacklist validation, and all untrusted data must be contextually encoded. HTML body, quoted HTML attribute, unquoted HTML attribute, untrusted URL, untrusted URL, untrusted get parameter, CSS style value, JavaScript variable assignment. So all of them is untrusted.
Parameter tampering is a simple attack targeting the application business logic. This attack takes advantage of the fact that many programmers rely on a hidden or text field such as hidden tags in a form or a parameter in a URL as the only other security measures for certain operations. Attackers can easily modify these parameters by bypass the security mechanism that rely on them. Testing web application for security weaknesses is basic, not with understanding. Many web applications prioritize to test site security, leaving it defenseless against some pernicious attacks. Perhaps the most widely recognized risk comes from a web parameter tampering weaknesses. So, tampering parameter can often be done with 4 ways, like from cookies, form sealed, HTTP header, or just URL query. So now let's talk about the impact of parameter tampering. Parameter tampering can be performed in several ways, resulting in data disclosure to server-side attacks. A cookie is a small piece of information usually created by the web server and stored in the web server. They are used as a convenient mechanism to store user preferences and other data, including session tokens. The cookies can be modified by the client and sent to the server with an URL request. Therefore, any malicious user can take the advantage of this and modify the cookie content so that they can attack the user using this. The form field manipulation occurs when an attacker tries to attack the user from or alter the behavior of a form by illegitimately change the data sent to the web server. When a user makes a selection on the HTML page, they are usually stored as form field values and sent to the web application. These values can be pre-selected using like combo box or checkbox or radio button, etc. All of these values can be manipulated by an attacker by viewing the source code of each web application. Hidden fields and parameters invisible to the end user, which includes data that cannot be seen or modified by the user when submitting the forms, or it is normally used to provide status information to the web application. When the URL passes sensitive value through the parameters, the attacker can tamper with the query string and perform some malicious actions using this. For example, suppose a web page allows an authenticated user to select one of his accounts and select one of his accounts from a combo box and then debit the account with a fixed unit account. The referrer header, which is included in the HTTP request header, normally contains the URL of the web page from which the request originated. Some websites use this referrer header in order to make sure that the request originated from a page that generated by them, and also identify where the people are visiting them from. This data can be used for analytics, login, or even for optimization caching. But sometimes attacker will be able to modify this referrer header to look like it came from the original site, and from this they can attack the user when the user will think like this looks like came from the original website, so it must be from them. So from this way they get attacked from parameter tampering. So how can we prevent this parameter tampering? So parameter tampering can be prevented by the following means, as you can see in this slide. Like, use a whitelist format for the application's input, use web applications firewall for the utmost protection, encrypt the session cookies to prevent the tampering. If the cookie originated from the client side, such as refer it, so it should be used to make any security decisions. And also avoid including parameters into the query string so that it can be prevented. Tampering detection is the capacity of a device to detect what is functioning inferior to the bargain the device operates, or the data related to the device is in progress. The detection of the risk may empower the device to start proper protective activities. Data tampering in the demonstration of intentionally adjusting, like editing, manipulating, or destroying data through unapproved channels. Data exists in two categories: at rest or in transit. In these two cases, the data could be tampered with or intercept with, like computerized correspondence, and like another one is data transmission. So finally, in conclusion, parameter tampering controls including tampering uniform resources and locate parameters to recover the data that would somehow be inaccessible to the client. Threads from abuse rely on this thing parameter and is being adjusted and strategically by which is submitted to the web server application by using the parameter. So that's all for the parameter tampering, how you can impact and prevent the parameter tampering. Cookie poisoning, also known as session hijacking, is a attack strategy in which the attacker alters, forge, hijack or otherwise poisons or otherwise a valid cookie is sent back to the server to steal the data, bypass security or both. In computing, a cookie is data specific to a website and uses session includes interest or identity information about the user that is created and stored in the user browser. And website and servers can use cookies to track and use trends such as which page on the site get the most traffic, as well as the customize and streamline the user experience, whether that means prioritizing content aligned with the user's previous visit, tracking item in an online shopping cart or autofilling personal information. Attackers can intercept cookies before they can return to the server to extract information from or just modify them. Forged cookies can also be created from scratch as a meaning for impersonating a user to access additional user data. Cookie poisoning is thus a misnomer in that it is often used to refer not only to modified poison cookies but to a variety of methods for stealing data from a valid cookie or other malicious use of them. So, if you open the developer tool panel in your web browser, you can view and manually modify cookies that are currently set. A vulnerable website or web application might store sensitive state information directly in cookies. For example, a flag to allow admin address. In that case, manually changing cookie names and values in the browser and reloading the page may be enough to gain elevated privileges. In the age of the web frameworks, it would be hard to find a production site or application where cookies are manually coded in such a vulnerable way, but theoretically it's possible. More usefully for attackers, JavaScript provides the document.cookie property for manipulating cookies from scripts. If a sensitive cookie such as the session cookie does not have any additional HTTP only flag, then it can be read and modified by malicious script following a successful cross-site scripting like XSS attack. In its broader sense, cookie poisoning can mean any kind of cookie manipulation, usually targeting session cookie. So HTTP is a stateless protocol, so application can use cookies to persist session information and other data on the user's computer. The session identifier is the most valuable piece of data stored in application cookies, as it opens the way of session hijacking and related attacks. All cookie based attacks are against user session, and that have the basic aim is to just fool the web server into thinking that the attacker is the legitimate user. So here's the main part of this. So session hijacking. So session hijacking is also called cookie hijacking or site hijacking. This is an attack where a user session is taken over by an attacker while the user is logged on to a particular site. The attack relies on the attacker's knowledge of a correct session cookie. Similar to the session hijacking but performed when the user is not logged in, attackers use stolen or forced session tokens to initiate a new session and impersonate the legitimate user with no user interaction required, and that is session spoofing. The attacker supplies the session identifier, for example in a phishing mail, and tricks the user into logging into a vulnerable site using this identifier. So if the site allows this, the attacker can then hijack the user and user's session using the known identifier, and this is called session fixation. Regardless of the method used, a successful session takeover can have a disastrous consequences. Depending on the target site or application, attacker may be able to steal confidential user information like your bank account or email address password, such as and also login credential, personal information, or personal undesirable operations such as transferring funds or adding new user account for future access. Preventing cookie poisoning attacks. As with so many security vulnerabilities, the common and the most cookie related attack is insufficient input validation and trusting user control data in HTTP request. Proper cookie hygiene is a fundamental best practice in web application security, and there are a number of security measures that can minimize the risk of cookie poisoning attack. So the first one is use the right cookie flag and attributes. There are several ways to make cookie less accessible to the attackers just by setting up the HTTP only flag. You can make a cookie inaccessible to scripts. This is recommended especially for session cookies, as in setting the secure flag to ensure that the cookie is only sent over the HTTPS. Carefully selecting values for the domain attributes can also minimize cookie abuse. See our cookie security white paper for some information. You can search for white paper information in Google and you will get all the results. Use cookie and secure session cookie. Session identifier should be inaccessible to attackers and randomly generated so that they are impossible to guess or brute force. They should be also unusable after the session is closed. So you can search for article like cross-site cookie manipulation for practical examples of attack against session identifier in PHP. Use each cookie for single task. It can be tempting to employ the multi-purpose cookies, but this complicates the overflow of work and can open up the security risk. Session cookies in particular should never be used as a NTCSRF tokens or password reset tokens. And the final one is use proper session management. Cookie security is specifically important for session management, as one mistake can open the door to attacks. The first step to following the best practices and avoid simple mistake is to using built-in session management feature from a trusted or mature framework, rather than reinventing the wheel, and which is then having to maintain it. So you can find an article while you Google it and learn why the web framework choice matters for security. So many online websites can detect many cookie related issues to help you secure your web application, and this includes the general warning and user controllable cookie, but also is specifically recommended related to HTTP only and secure flags. So these are about the all basic and broad view of the cookie poisoning. Untrusted data is a very important concept in security, and it's something we touch on when looking at the number of different risks, which depends on information provided extremely to the system and frequently from the user. And when we talk about the untrusted data, we are talking about the few different keys attributes. So first one is the integrity is not verifiable. It has been sourced from outside the system, so we don't necessarily have confidence that it hasn't been manipulated in some other way outside. What the system would normally expect that may have been happened is the user browser, so it may have happened by a man in the middle. So there are various ways with the integrity may have been modified. So the other thing we have got to expect that the intent may be malicious. So we need to expect that every single piece of data command and the data system could have been an evil intention. Now of course, once a piece of data contains a malicious payload, it may have a objective such as executing a SQL injection or attack, which we will look a little bit later on a cross-site scripting. So which looking at now, it may even be like there is some binary containing and some malware, and everything we see there is untrusted data. So we as a developer need to expect that it may be provided to the system in order to do evil, and we need to protect against this potential risk. Let's have a look at some of these places that untrusted data can come from, and the obvious one is from the user. So how does a user provide untrusted data to a system? Where the first thing is there is this query string or any other attributes of the URL. It's easy to user to change the URL to manipulate parameters in a URL, and that's something we'll be looking at more in the details later on, and we'll talk about it with the parametric tampering lecture. So of course the other channel where the untrusted data frequently comes from the user is by a form of data in a post request. So they fill out fields on a web page, they click submit, and we cannot trust that data. We must expect that that could be malicious because ultimately it is untrusted. Another source of untrusted data is from the browser. So even the most legitimate of request from the user still causes the browser to send particular piece of data along with the request. So for example, in the cookies, we must expect that the cookies could be manipulated. So it's a very easy to simply reconstruct a request and manipulate the cookies, and particularly later on as well start looking at how we can use the composer feature of Fiddler. So and we will see how easy that is to use the Fiddler application. So there are some attributes of the request header. So for example, the user agent, every time the browser hits a web page, it sends the identity of the browser and the version of the operating system and other related information in the request header that can be manipulated by the attacker. So if for an example the application has a SQL injection risk, so when it looks at the language used in the browser, which is a part of the request header, and that could exploit that by manipulating the value of a language header in order to leaving room malicious payload. And they might do is to there is a tool such as called fiddler, and finally there are a bunch of other location of untrusted data that came from. So for example, if you consume an external web service, that is a source of untrusted data, and if you need to make an assumption that there could be malicious payload in the data, not necessarily because the system you are consuming and that you are consuming it is from is what is doing is trying to do the evil, and but what happens is if it gets the compromise that affect your own database, and that could have a untrusted data. So if you accept untrusted data from a user via the reform input and then store it in your system now has a untrusted data in it. And this is the one of the things we look at when we look at the persistent access risk in this upcoming lecture. So in the last thing we'll look at before moving to the another application itself is the concept of input sanitization. And what we are talking about here is the system saying, hey, I am receiving a untrusted data from the user, and I am going to apply some filter criteria to what I think is acceptable and what is not acceptable. So if I get something which is not acceptable, then I am going to throw up a exception or reject the request to take some other sort of defensive actions, and in order to try and protect myself from a potential malicious attack. So as for example, you will often find system rejecting characters such as hyphen, brackets, single quotes, slashes, double quotes, backslashes, semicolons. You have probably seen it before you where you go and either one of these characters into a field and have it rejected. That is the input sanitization, and there are a couple of different approaches a developer can take to the implement sanitization. And the first approach is to which is very specific about what you want to reject. So this is what we call lackluster approach, where the system is saying, hey, there are some characters I do not trust, or conversely anything that is not this character must be. So okay, now that's a very simple approach, but it's also very rudimentary and it also has some holes in it. It's a very easy for that approach to be incomplete, and we're going to see an example of it. So on the problem, you may know or you may think that what a bad character is today, but if the new attack factory is discovered tomorrow, your system may still be at the risk. As a far from explicit way of implementing sanitization is to use what I would refer to as a whitelist. As previously we talked about the blacklist, so it is a whitelist approach, and a whitelist is effectively the inverse of a blacklist, where we say there are the characters that we are no good, so this is what we trust, and anything else we are going to reject all of that. Now this is a much more comprehensive, because if there are things that are potentially bad that we don't know yet how bad it is or how long they are the part of it, so whitelist that we are going to be pretty safe. So there are various different ways with implementing whitelist depending on the types of the data. So an email address, for example, is very easy to implement. What this case is there is a spec of email, and there is a regular extension that can be written to validate an email, and that's a easy one. So we don't have to explicitly say an email address can never contain, say, a single quote. Instead, the whitelist will talk about the things like allowable characters and the inclusion of an @ symbol, that other attributes that make up a well-formed email address. It is a little harder with the things like names, but there is still regular expression that allow common language characters, and of course there is always a edge cases, and it does get a lot more difficult when you start talking about multiple characters, languages and some punctuations. But you can easily get a whitelist which is pretty comprehensive and keeps out of the typical characters that he used in a text, such as cross-site scripting and SQL injection. So that's all for the untrusted data. Hidden fields are specified by the tag that are often used by web application developers to pass information back and forth between the form and the backend program, and that processes the forms, because HTTP is a stateless protocols, and hidden field provide that much functionality for tracking a user course throughout the application. Some developer make a mistake of passing application and the configuration parameters to backend application program with hidden fields. So in the case of the attack of acmert.com, the hacker retrieved the configuration file for the shopping cart by looking at a hidden field in an HTML form. The following line led the hacker into the example as a, let me give you an example like cart.ini configuration file, and eventually to the list of authorized credit card and log, etc. Not only does such a mistake lead to the information leakage, but it also allows the web hackers to tamper with the data contained in the hidden fields by saving a local copy of the HTML code and then modifying it and resubmit it into the backend application. Parameter tampering. So parameter tampering is a web-based business logic attack, and it involves manipulation of parameters exchanged between client and server to modify the application data, such as user credential, permission, the number of product, etc. It is intended as a business security threat that involves an unauthorized party manipulation and tampering with the website's URL, and also web pages, forms, or any other parameters. Usually this information is stored in cookies, hidden form fields, or URL query string, and is being used to increase application functionality and control. This attack can be performed by a malicious user who wants to exploit the application for their own benefit, or an attacker who wishes to attack a third person using a man-in-the-middle attack. In both cases, tools like WebScrap and Paros proxy are mostly used. The attack success depends on the integrity and logic validation mechanism here, and its exploitation can be result as other consequences, including accesses, SQL injection, file inclusion, and path disclosure attacks. So let's talk about an example of the tampering. So first, if and foremost, is changing a cheap product to an expensive one scenario. So while making a payment, a product is added to basket on an application. Then a request is made for the cheaper product, and the parameter of the request are saved before the product goes back to the bank for the approval. Subsequently, a request is made on the expensive product but is replaced with the information about the cheaper product, and then again sent to the bank for approval. The bank then approves the cheaper product. Unlimited cart scenario. A product that is added to the basket cannot be confirmed by the bank because the balance is insufficient. The error message parameter in the request shows the value of cart plus sale plus limit plus insufficient, since there is not enough in the user credit card balance. However, when there is the error message and response and procurator code parameter value of the request then updated and it approves the order. Changing price scenario. In this scenario, the price value can be easily changed and lowered the price and passing the order for the payment for the benefits of the attacker, so that they can choose the price they are willing to pay. Like as an example, a $500 product, so they change the price and they send it to like $50 and pay that price to get the product. So while making a payment, a product is added to the basket on the application in the customer payment request. So the price is then edited in the request and sent for the bank for approval. As seen in this screenshot, the request is intercepted before it sent to the bank, and the total amount and amount parameters are changed to a different price. The transaction value of the product is changed from 409.98 to 0.98 and sent to the bank. So it is very easy to simply change the value of a hidden field, and the web application needs to work on the assumption of that attackers. Example of where there is a risky of shopping application where there is a field there might persist the price of the item that we previously talked being purchased, and if an attacker can modify these hidden fields and change the value of an product, then that the product goes through the checkout and then they pay that what probably the more than less and more than half of the less of the actual price, because they tampered with the field, and that would be very effective attack for the attacker. I have also seen systems that do things like persist the internal application connection stream as the one that actually connects the app to the database in a hidden field. So in fact, I have seen it in a view listed in as an example of a website like ASP.NET application, which is persisted as that hidden field. This does sometimes happen when people either put sensitive data in a hidden field or data in a hidden field that can be modified to cause the application to do something completely different to what it was designed to do. So you want to pay very close attention to these hidden forms and fields on the website that you visit and that you shop most often. So let's now move on to the next lecture on different types of tampering attack, and that's we'll be talking about in the next lecture. So what is mass assignment attack? So in order to reduce the work for developers, many framework providers convenient mass assignment functionality. This lets developer inject an entire sets of user entered data from a form directly into the object or the database. Without it, developer would be forced to tediously add code specifically for each field of data, cluttering the code base with repeated form mapping code. The downside of this functionality is that it is often implemented without a whitelist that prevents user from assigning data to the protected fields. An attacker may exploit this vulnerability to gain access to sensitive data or to cause the data loss. So, an example of this, simple example of this is an attacker exploiting mass assignment vulnerabilities can update object properties that they should not have access to allow them to escalate privileges, tamper with data, and bypass security mechanisms. So, in this example, the attacker has changed the API call to update their account and escalate their role and privileges to an admin role and bypass the SSO single sign-on. If successful, the attacker can then perform action within the application as an administrator. So, prevent the Rails, which means the Rails framework is taken as a reference, offers two class methods in the active record class to control or limit the access to your attributes. Like attribute protected means blacklist principle, and attribute accessible means whitelist principle. So, attribute protected. So, this method requires a list of attributes that cannot be accessed for mass assignment. To set up protected attributes, you must assign them individually, like as I shown here, attribute protected as admin and attribute protected last logging, then it sent to as admin. So, and another one is attribute accessible. So, another convenient way is to use whitelist principle is the attribute accessible method. This is exactly the opposite of the above attribute protected method, which is this like a method which allows a list of attributes that can be accessed. All other attributes will be protected, and this way it is easier to protect attributes while adding a new one during the development. Utilizing mass assignment may make the work of developer easier, but it will help as attackers exploit vulnerabilities. Hence, it is important for developer to use mass assignment carefully by considering all the security measures that helps the developers to keep the web app secure for all of the developer himself and also for all of the users that going to be used. So, prevention against mass assignment. You should try to disable the automatic mapping of properties whenever possible. All properties should be mapped manually and others should be ignored for the better case of yourself. You should not rely on block list to block the data that the user is not allowed to edit, but instead you should rely on the whitelist that enables user to edit specific objects. This will be more resource intensive though, as you have to have a really good overview of the logic and properties of the application. But knowing this brings a lot of security to the table is a strong argument for the added cost. Rely on the function of the framework when backlisting or whitelisting instead of writing your own. These functions have been tested many times over the years, so they are more likely to be safe than a custom built function. If you have a resources, then you should always investigate the request and responses that reaches the API and what properties they can have. Test if you have time, then test the parameters if the user cannot edit or actually read only by sending them in a request and trying to edit them. So in conclusion, I will say that as you can see, you need to think very carefully about the function of each parameter and make sure you understand what it means and what all the options are with the specific property. Make sure you investigate all the properties and the object that has in the properties and also that have on the API, and the unused properties that do not get sent to the production where they might get abused. So that's all for the mass assignment. Reflected access attack, also known as non-persistent attack, occurs when a malicious script is reflected of a web application to the victim's browser. The script is activated through a link. So let me just define this. The scripted is activated through a link which sends a request to the website with a vulnerability that enables execution of a malicious script. The vulnerability is typically a result of an incoming request not being sufficiently sanitized, which allows the manipulation of a web application function and the activation of a malicious script. To distribute the malicious link, a perpetrator typically embedded a email or a third-party website like a social section or a social media. The link is embedded inside an anchor text and that provokes the user to click on it, which initiates the access request to exploit the website, reflecting the attack back to the user. Unlike in a store attack, where the perpetrator must locate a website that allows to permanent injection of a malicious script, which reflected the attack only, then required that the malicious script is embedded into a link. That being said, in order for an attack to be successful, the user need to be click on the infected link that the attacker has sent in some way. So as such, there are a number of key differences between reflected and the access attack, including reflected attacks are more common, and reflected attacks do not have a same reach as stored access attack, and reflected attack can be avoided by vigilant users. With a reflected access, the perpetrator plays a number game, which means by he sends the malicious link to as many as user possible, thereby improving his odds of successfully executing the whole process and getting the attack. So persistent accesses, also known as store accesses. These types of vulnerability occurs when a untrusted or unverified user input is stored on a target server. Common target for persistent accesses included message form, comment field or visitor logs, or any feature when the other user, either authenticated or non-authenticated, will view the attacker's malicious content. Publicly visible profile page like those common social media sites and membership groups are one good example for this desirable target for persistent accesses. The attacker may enter the malicious script in the profile boxes, and when other users visit the profile, their browser will execute the code automatically and they will get attacked. And another side of reflective access, reflective or non-persistent cross-site scripting involves the immediate return of the user input. To exploit a reflective access, an attacker must trick the user into sending data to the target site, which is often done by tricking the user into clicking the malicious crafted link. In many cases, reflective access attacks rely on phishing emails or shorten or otherwise obscure URLs sent to the target user. So, when the victim visits the link, the script automatically executed from their browser. Search result and error message passages and also two common targets of the reflected accesses. They often send unmodified user input as a part of the response without ensuring that the data is properly escaped so that it displayed safely in the browser. So, impact of reflected accesses. If an attacker can control a script that is executed in the victim's browser, then they can typically fully compromise that user. Among other things, the attacker can, as an example, what can the attacker do? So, the attacker can perform any action within the application that the user can perform. View any information that the user is able to view. Modify any information the user is able to modify. Initiate interaction with other application user, including malicious attack that will appear in to originate from the initial victim user. There are various means by which an attacker might induce a victim user to make a request that they can control and to deliver a reflected accesses attack. This including placing links on a website controlled by the attacker or another website that allows content to be generated, or by sending a link to an email, tweet or any other types of messages. The attack could be targeted directly against a known user or could be an indiscriminate attack against any user of the application. So, the need for the external delivery mechanism for an attack means that the impact of the reflected accesses is generally less severe than the stored accesses, where a self-contained attack can be delivered within the vulnerable application itself. So, the prevention and mitigation. So, there are several effective methods for preventing the mitigated reflected accesses attack. So, first and foremost, from the user's point of view, vigilance is the best way to avoid accesses scripting. Specifically, the means is not clicking on suspicious links which may contain malicious code. Suspicious links include those found in like email from unknown senders, website comment section, social media feed of an unknown user. Or having said that, it is ultimately up to the website operator to prevent potential abuse to their user. Additionally, web application firewalls, in short WAFs, also plays an important role in mitigating the reflected accesses attack, with signature-based security rules supported by other users. A WAF can compensate for the lack of the input sanitization and simply block the abnormal requests. This includes but is not limited to the request that attempt to execute a reflected cross-site scripting attack. It should be noted that unlike in a stored attack where the perpetrator's malicious requests to a website are blocked, in a reflected access attack it is the user's requests that are blocked. This is done by protect by the user as well as prevent collateral damage to all other website users. The web application firewall also use signature filtering to the counter reflected accesses. Additionally, the WAF employ crowdsourcing technology which automatically collects and aggregates attack data from the across all the cloud network for the benefit of the all user. So, the crowdsourcing component of a cloud security service ensures a quick response to zero-day threat and protects the entire user community against a new threat. it also enables the user of a advanced security and including those that monitor IP reputation and also keep the track of repeated offenders and botnet devices. Persistent cross-site scripting, as other name, is stored scripting attack represent one of the three major types of cross-site scripting. The other two types of attack of these kinds are non-persistent accesses and DMS-based accesses. In general, accesses attacks are based on the victim's trust in a legitimate but vulnerable web application or website. A persistent accesses attacks is possible when a website or a server application stores user input and later serves it to the other user. An application is vulnerable if it does not validate user input before storing contents and embedding it into the HTML response pages. Attackers use vulnerable web pages to inject malicious code and have it stored on the website for the later use. The payload is automatically served to users who browses web pages and executed in their contexts. Thus, the victim do not need to click on a malicious attack to run the payload, like as in the case of non-persistent access, or all that have to do is visit a vulnerable web pages. So, persistent accesses attack generally target websites like online communities and internet forums, as also known as like messages, bulletins, or discussion boards, guest books, social network platform, or unknown people's comment section that accept user generated content. An attacker, for example, posts a seemingly like attractive comment, but the comment contains a malicious script. Later, when a user views that comment, the user browser runs the script automatically. So, persistent accesses attack, more commonly known as stored, because malicious code is saved on the web server or in a database, that are considered the most dangerous types, because any visitor who views the comment becomes a unwitting victim even though he didn't do anything. The attacker doesn't need to use any tactics or tricks to deceive the user. So, this diagram assumes that the targeter has already discovered a persistent cross-site scripting vulnerability on the target web application and has a way to tricking or ensuring the victim will visit the page that containing the persistent accesses payload. Typical entry point for persistent accesses is required user supplied input to be stored on the application, because it makes it persistent and it renders within the page. So, there is the list of the some of the typical locations where persistent accesses vulnerability exist, like in message forums, in blog comments, or profile page information, or even in admin portals. Attack vectors for persistent accesses. An attacker can execute JavaScript of their choosing on the victim machine. Therefore, accesses can be used to execute a number of security risks and or to be used in combination with other web vulnerabilities to exploit a higher severity security vulnerability. Like as an example, redirecting the browser, link placement, hooking browser means redirecting vulnerable browser to exploits. Cookie theft or the common session hijacking, key logging, using accesses to steal CSRF tokens, fake login forms, and finally the abusing HTML5. Cookie theft. The following example uses a vulnerable block comment system to inject a accesses payload on a popular page often visited by victims. The following accesses payload attempts to load an image from the attacker server with a victim cookie data within the request URL. After a request for the image has taken place, the attacker can extract the victim session identifier from the web server log files. So let me explain the cookie theft situation. So first, the attacker sends the accesses payload to the victim, which is the HTML script. Then the victim requests the page from the server. Either the attacker tricked the victim into visiting the page, or the accesses payload is on a popular page. The web server serves the page containing the accesses payload to the victim's web browser. The victim's web browser executed the JavaScript payload and a request to load an image containing the victim cookie data and is made to the attacker's web server. The attacker has now in the victim session identifier, allowing the attacker to perform the session hijacking. So how to prevent a cross-site scripting situation in persistent accesses? So the scripting attacks can seriously damage your site and your visitors. Because of that, you should put it in an appropriate effort to prevent it from being possible on your content. You might also be vulnerable or not even know about it if you don't prevent these types of things. So there are the 3 types of things we will talk about prevention. So first is sanitize data. So data entry on popular website needs to be properly sanitized to prevent the improper inputs that might lead to the cross-site scripting. Developers should read the documentation on how WordPress deals with PHP filters, as the goal is to be able to automatically remove the undesirable character from input fields. Applying function calls the sanitized data is within the many WordPress common conventions. Data validation helps you make sure that your data and the data you receiving from the user matches what you need. Fortunately, there is a PHP function for that. This can be done through filler_var, which accept validation such as, for example, making sure that an email address is fully formatted as an email address. Further option can be read through within the PHP documentation. Using the escape exit is the way to prevent user submission data from including the HTML entities. As such, this can be done through PHP functions such as noHTML. To further improve your hosting security against cross-site scripting, prefer to use a library like HTML purifier, as it is able to escape entire blocks of the HTML in a standard compliant way. So that's all for the persistent cross-site scripting attack and entry point attack, cookie theft and prevention. Cross-site request forgery, also known as CSRF, is a web security vulnerability that allows an attacker to induce a user to perform action that they don't intend to perform. It allows an attacker to partially circumvent the same origin policy, which is designed to prevent different websites from interfacing with each other. A successful CSRF attack can be devastating for both the business and the user. It can result in a damaged client relationship, unauthorized fund transfer, change password, and data theft, including stolen session cookies. CSRF are typically conducted by using malicious social engineering, such as an email or link that tricks the victim into sending a forged request to a server, as the unsuspecting user is authenticated by their application at the time of the attack, and it is impossible to distinguish a legitimate request from a forged one. So CSRF attack target website that trust some form of authentication by user before they perform any action. For example, a user log into a e-commerce site and make a payment after some purchasing goods. The trust is established when the user is authenticated during the login and the payment function, which is in the website, uses their task to identify the user. Then the attackers exploit this trust and send the forged request on behalf of the authenticated user. So this illustrator shows how the making of the CSRF attacks. CSRF is a common form of attack and has CSRF is a common form of attack and has ranked several times in the OWASP Top 10 Open Web Application Source Project. OWASP. The OWASP Top 10 represent a broad consensus about the most critical security risks to web applications. The OWASP website defines CSRF as it is an attack that forces an end user to execute unwanted action on a web application in which they are currently authenticated. With a little bit of help from social engineering, such as sending a link via email or chat, an attacker may trick the user of a web application into executing action of the attacker's choosing. How does cross-site request forgery work? This attack focuses on targeting state-changing request, which refers to the type of request that result in a data being changed from one value to another. For example, a targeted request might make a purchase or change a value in an account. So interestingly, this is a blind attack and thus does not return the data to the attacker, making it a poor choice of the data type. So here is an example of the 4 steps in a cross-site request forgery attack. An attacker creates a forged request that will transfer $10,000 from a particular bank into the attacker bank, and the attacker embeds the forged request into a hyperlink and send it out as the bulk email, and also embedded it into the websites. A victim click on an email or website link placed by the attacker, resulting in the victim make a request to the bank to transfer like $10,000. The bank server receives the request, and because the victim is properly authorized, it treats the request as a legitimate and then transfer the funds. So how can cross-site request forgery be mitigated or prevented? So the common methodology for mitigating CSRF attack involves using anti-CSRF tokens using one of the two methods. While the token implementation are slightly different, the underlying principle remains the same. By creating and then comparing a randomly generated token string, an attacker is then less likely to be able to perform an attack and without an exceptionally unlikely guess. So, when a user visits a website such as bank website that allows for the transfer of funds, the bank's website embeds a random token into the form. So, when the user submits this form, the random token is returned to the bank and will be able to check to see if the two tokens match. So, if the token match, then the transfer occurs. The attacker has no way to access the random token value created in the web pages. And if they request the page, the same origin policy would prevent the attacker from reading the responses. And that is a synchronized token pattern. And the downside of this method is mitigating is it increases the burden of the server side to check the validity of the token with each request. It can also create issues if a user has multiple browser windows or other conditions that involve different software making the request. By expanding the scope of the token to be per session instead of a per request, some of this difficulty can be avoided. Another method involves issuing a cookie to the visitor's web pages that contains a random token. JavaScript operating on the client side will read the value of the token in the cookie and copy it into the HTTP header, and that will be sent to the each request. If a genuine request is sent from the user, the value in header can be verified by the user, and any other instances will fail and mitigating a successful attack. As recommended by OWASP, the approaches of same-site cookie prevention should be used together with a CSRF token strategy and not as a substitute. The same-site cookie approach restricts the origin from which a cookie can be sent. Thus, the CSRF exploit the possibility of making a cross-origin request by limiting requests so that they can only be sent from the origin to which a cookie is related. The ability to send external requests to an application is effectively prevented. A technique that is particularly effective for kayaks or API endpoint is the use of custom request headers. In this approach, JavaScript used to add a custom header, but unfortunately, JavaScript cannot make cross-origin request with a custom header because of the SOP security restrictions. This prevents sending a cross-domain request with a custom header, and therefore they eliminate the possibility of a high CSRF attack. So, in conclusion, CSRF attack comprise a good percentage of web-based attacks. It is crucial to be aware of the vulnerabilities that could make our website a potential target for CSRF attack and prevent this attack by building a proper CSRF defenses in all of our applications. Brute force attack. So, what do we talk about here? We are talking about an attacker trying over and over and over again to execute some sort of online process. So, for example, trying to log in or log on to someone's account multiple times with a different credential. So, let me show you an example. Let me say that we have our attacker here on the left and we have the target website on the right. Now the attacker tries to log in. They use a username like a random username like John Smith or password like ABC, and that's one of the most common password used on the web today, like 129 password as username as your name. So that would be a very logical place for the attacker to start assuming, and of course the site will allow to such weak passwords, but we'll talk more about it when we will get to the lecture of registration. Now when the attacker tries to log on to this credential, it fails. So he goes back again and he tries with a different set of credential and password. So this time it's a common keyword pattern, and again a very popular password choice, and it's a bad one, it's a very popular. Now this one also fails, so the attacker goes back and tries yet another password, and this one is finally successful. So the attacker has made it through, and this is precisely what brute force attack is. So actually it's a very simplistic example of a brute force attack, and there is one factor in particular is that that's normally very different, and that's automation brute force attack. And normally highly automated processes, so we are talking about an attacker taking an account that they know exists, and I'm going to show you the establish of an account that exists, and then going through and trying a sorts of different password combination and until they are able to log in. Now again, this is the fundamental security concept lecture. So this is not just about logging. They might also mount on attack against and say password reset. The point is it's a iterative, it's highly automated, so it can run at a very high way and high rate, and it's really a question how often the attacker can send this request, and conversely this is the key. When we talk about how to secure this, how frequently the website allows to login, and login it is to made, one thing the brute force attack is. So let me give you an example of where this happened. So in the history of a 2013, as per the headline, GitHub as a popular website as well known suffered a really significant brute force attack against it, and in many cases the attack was successful, but as the story says, it was usually when they were weak and reuse the passwords. Now for those us creating account management facilities, we have got a limited amount of control over the bad password choice of our users, but we can do have some control over how we can manage brute force attack. So what made the attacker of a GitHub rather tricky was that the hacker used nearly 40,000 unique IP address. So they were rotating the IP address so that GitHub didn't see a huge volume of requests coming from a single IP, and then they just simply block it. Now for many IP addresses, inevitably this attack was orchestrated in a viral botnet infected machine, just like the kind probably sitting on your desk. Hopefully not your machine, but certainly there are many ways machine out there that are compromised by malware and now under the control of a botnet. So these attacks tens of thousands of unique IP addresses, hammering away at thousands and thousands of GitHub accounts allegedly, and at just the right rate they weren't tipping off. So GitHub brute force protection on many of the account, and also throwing in enough randomization that the attacker tried in many different accounts, but they weren't. But so just they're necessary hitting the one with 40,000 different locations. So we'll talk about some of the ways to defend against this sort of attack, but certainly this is in particular would have been very tricky one to defend against. So that's the brute force. So let's now move on to the event login. So I want to talk about the event login because this is really important for reconstruction. What happened when things go wrong, and indeed it's also important for you to take any action based on the series of activities. So for example, if something has already happened and several times, like a login failure against an account, you may want to take some action, and all of that has to be driven by login. Now there is a bunch of things that you really want to be logging every time a certain action happen, and I will talk about these as we go through this on this lecture, and I will show you some of the examples of popular websites where logging is done really well. Now one of the things that we want to log in is who. So for example, if something has already happened and who perform the actions in there, and the identity we can save. So particularly when we talk about account management, which is someone has logged in and we want to stamp their identity along with any other logs that we created about their identity or activity. So that makes things really easy. If we need to find out who is being performing certain actions, the next thing of this lecture is to what we do want to log onto these actions. So what was it that they were doing and what action they were performing, what resources were they performing and against. So the URL or even down at the function level name, which of course may be based on the path and the parameter. The more information that we can capture here, the better it naturally. So we also want to know when this is happened and when allow us to align some certain activities with other events. It also gives us chronology at what did they do in order to what order. So think about attacker poking around a system. If we have these things, and we can really start to get a good look at sense and what's going on, but there is a more that we can get. For example, where do they come from? IP address is really useful, and yes, attackers cannot obfuscate their IP address, so they can use VPN service. They can use something like Tor, but that it itself tells you something important, that they are with the deliberately identity and obscured. So why is this open? Because they are up to no good. The other one is what they are using when performing these activities. So what's the browser? Can you store the user agent, and they are using now, of course they can obfuscate this, and you can send any user agent that you like with that request. But again, that tells you something, that if you are not saying a typical browser user agent, then there may be no good, but it will also tell you things like, hey, this is just a crawler from a search engine, alright. So they made some odd requested, and if it's the Google bot, then it's probably wasn't up to no good. And finally, we are where. So what path did the person take to get this to the site, and you can get that from the referrer of the request and the request header. This tells you that the interesting things on when you have a text like CSRF that I spoke about previously. So did an attacker website cause a victim to make a request? And guess what? The victim browser is going to tell you exactly what the attacker attacker is and what website was, or at least it will tell you where they have just come, and it will help you to start to piece together the full function. So what's going on? All of this information can be invaluable, or is invaluable at a time when you are really desperate to find that information. It's also valuable at a time, and of course we are going to be talking about there has been some sort of incident where you cannot simply reconstruct the information and the logs, and but if you don't already have them, you have to be productive. So a lots of framework have very easy logging implementation that will let you save all the information easily with just a line or just a code of some basic configuration. Dump it into the another database, and if you have got a certain amount of space, maybe you just keep the last month of so data so that you can check or utilize it when you need. So finally, to capture and store as much as you can and become sooner or later, this is going to be really level information. So in this lecture we are going to be take a look at attack against identity management and also access control. So this is going to come down to how people manage their accounts online and how those people are authorized to access resources within the web application. So this is a couple of discrete yet quite closely related topics which are very common issues to deal with in the web application. So let's move on and take a look at the overview of what we are going to be talk about in this lecture. So first of all, as you are about to learn the account management and facilities are frequently exploitable, and what I mean by that is that there are many different way account management system are built which can present viable exploits to the attackers. So you will see a bunch of those in this lecture, and if you are really interested in the security account management facilities, go check out I covered couple of these topics in my previously. So the one thing we need to find is when we look at the access control, and we have to look at frequently that it's not very good. Now that may mean that they are missing, so there is a no access control, that all the resources should have a proper authorization. Well, it's insufficient, so it hasn't been properly there, it gaps in the implementation, and I'm going to show you a great example of this. So in some degree there is also understandable because the facilities, both identity management and access control, can be quite complex. I mentioned earlier that nuances, there are a lot of different ways that these things can be implemented, and lot of different edge cases, and not all the technical either. Some of them are social, and you will see what I mean by that as we go through this lecture. So whilst it certainly critical to get to the right, it's not always easy either. What you will find though in this flaw is easy to detect. Some of the things you are about to see, you recognize other web application you use, and certainly after this lecture it will be very easy for you to find them in the web application that you are testing. So one last point is this is normally where I would include like session hijacking, but I do already have that dedicated lecture that I covered previously. So session hijacking is kind of in this topic related, so it's better if you go and take a look at the session hijacking. So let's now talk about identity management in definition. So identity management is also known as identity and access management, that ensure the authorized people and only authorized people have access to the technology resources they need to perform for their job functions. It includes policies and technologies that encompass a organization-wide process to properly identify or authenticate and authorize people and the group of people or software application through attributes including user access rights and restriction based on their identities. An identity management system prevents unauthorized access to system and resources, helps to prevent an enterprise of protected data, and raise alert and alarms when access attempts are made by unauthorized personnel or programs, whether from inside or outside the enterprise perimeter. So you can have a question like why do we need a identity management? So let's give you an answer to this. So a recent study found that 80% of the breaches were due to the identity access issues, namely weak or mismatched credentials. If proper control are not in place or procedures and processes of identity access management are properly followed, password could become compromised, phishing attacks enabled, and breaches of ransomware attack became a reality. Fortunately, modern IAM platform offers automation of many of the functions to help ensure the controls that are utilized, such as removing a user from the directory when a HIS system indicates that employee has left the organization. Since new privacy and data security legislation is so frequently created, IAM can play an important role that of helping the organization stay in compliances within the myriad of a regulatory and governance mandates in effect, ensuring that only authorized users have access to the data. But the data itself is where it should be. In the end, IT security is largely about the access. So, a solid IAM strategy is a critical component of a overall IT security and offers a first-line protection to any threat, whether from outside or inside the firewall. So, let's go and take a look at the weaknesses in identity management. So, I am going to start with just a couple of examples of weakness in identity management, and that are rather glaring weakness, but they are good illustration of how badly we can get identity management wrong. So take this for an example. Just take a moment to read. What this login process is now, of course, keep in mind that the mobile number is almost public to anyone, to any of your friends, colleagues, or even on the online you share your phone numbers. So this is a really good and bad example of a login implementation. It really doesn't get much worse than that. So let me show you another example of this. This one was covered quite extensively in the earlier 2015s. So the organization didn't seem to be see the problem with the implementation, but if you take a moment and read through it, what you realize is that the password reset feature only needed a username, which by default is an email address and a birthday date. Now, after you provide these two pieces of information, you could reset the password. No verification, no nothing. So we didn't have any demonstrate that. So you actually own the email address, or you had to do the show that you know your attacker knows your email address and guess the date of your birth from any of your online or social pages, or just randomly guessed it. So the irony of this particular case is that the organization said, hey, your name is sensitive data and you shouldn't be able to sharing it. It's your email address. That's how you get email. You share it with the other people, and as for birthday, that is obviously a personal attribute which is shared extensively, not just with your friend but via the other channels such as social media. So it's not as hard to discover the someone's birthday. It's just easy. So these two pieces of information together were enough to reset an account, which then gave you access the money. So in this case, money and the gambling account in this Betfair account, in this betting site. So these two examples do set a bit of low bar in terms of just how the bad identity management can be. But I wanted to start here and give you a little bit of sense of the level that we often have to deal with these challenges. And certainly if you are wearing an ethical hat and if you are looking for a vulnerabilities and system implementation like this, do tend to stand out of somewhat hopefully that sets the scene of how bad it can be. So let's start looking at some specific implementation of identity management and have weaknesses in them. Okay. So now in the feature I will talk about the identity and immigration. So in this lecture we will be talking about how you can hack using Remember Me feature. So this is the another feature of identity management that I have seen done very poorly. So what is this Remember Me feature? So this is the little checkbox you can see on the screen in here, and it is very familiar to you, I guess. Like every web page you nowadays login has this Remember Me if you tick. So you see that many different sites on the web, and it allows the user to return to the website in an authenticated state without having to go and log in. Again, there are web applications where this makes a lot of sense, like Facebook for example. You may want to people like to log in every time. So like me, you don't want to log in every time giving username and password. You just simply click or tick this Remember Me, and every time you go to Facebook it will automatically log in. So you want people to keep coming back to this site with a very low barrier to entry. So already being authenticated and immediately seeing your social feed is quite a valuable feature for Facebook. However, the way this feature gets implemented can be very weak, and I would like to show you that now. What I am going to do is I am going to log in with my normal username and my password. So I will be using a normal password, and I will select Remember Me. So let's log in. As you can see, it logged into the page. So let's now see what is in this page right now. So go right click on the mouse, right click, go to inspect and go to storage. Go to application or even cookie editor. All of those will work. Then okay, then go to storage, and in here as you can see we have email, we have password, So look at the cookies for this site. Now there are a couple of cookies in here, but I want to point out the one which is the cookie of email, as you can see that I put, and there is another cookie which is password, which is in hash. Now you will notice that it will expire on this date. So as you can see, this will expire those cookies onto this date. So the other cookie that you can see in here, which is the password, and if you look at the value, it doesn't look like a typical password, and indeed it isn't a typical password, it is a hash, and I have used a really poor password, not what you want to see in here. But does this looks like a very familiar pattern. So let's take a closer look at it. So just copy this here, and we're gonna go to base 64. So this is the encode and decode website, which is I think the best one you can find, which is free. So let's now drop the cookie that we copy, and let's just press decode. As you can see, this is the password that we put in our password field, and we can now see the password using a simple encode and decode method. So we have decoded the 64 stream, and this is the password, which is extremely poor password that I used on my account. So on this vulnerable page, I remember to implement on this page, simply look for the email and password cookie, and in fact it is a very easy to notice when you go to this cookie page. So sometimes without even base 64, encoding the password is just very simple and very basic. It just demonstrates that they didn't even try to obfuscate the password. You can also use this in another way. So let's show you in another way. So let's log off. Let's use our barb suit, which is the best tools you can find to intercept your proxies. So let's open. We are going to use their built-in browser. So proxy, let's turn intercept on. Let's open the browser. Let's go to this website. Let's go to login. 1235. So this is the username and this. So as you can see, it already intercept all of those in here, and as you can see, these are the cookies for both password, and this is the email address, and this is the session ID. As you can see, there are lots of information you can get in here, like this is using Linux, same origin. So also you can simply decode these in here. As you can see, it already decoded using a built-in tools that are in here, so you don't need to go and visit every time in this page. You just simply intercept a HTTP proxy and just simply click, and it will automatically decode all of your hash password or base 64 hash end to end here. So this is pretty easy. Previously I also showed you how to do that with a persistent access attack. Those access attack that send all the cookies off to the attacker would send the direct access to both the email cookie and the password cookie. That's now about the credential theft, so that it is become a very serious issue just because the way the data is stored. And the thing you need to remember with credential theft is that when we look at the password storage in the credential theft, or in the credential location, and this tab option is more than just the risk of the website that is disclose the credential, but it also the risk to everywhere else that the user of the website uses their password, because most of us uses the same password on every other website, so that if someone can get and decode our password, they can simply use our email and also use our password to log into our every password if we use the same password to all of the social media or other websites. So that's why it's better to use different password on every other website, and I highly recommend you do that. If you are still using a same password on your or social media or any other informational website, make sure you change it now. It is very important, because when we look at the password storage in the credential tab, it is more than just a risk of the website that disclose the password. It is also risk for everyone else that the user of the password uses their password. So it's, I would say, terrible practice if you use the same password in every other website. But even to this day, it happens extensively. So the impact of disclosing a password even on a site which it may not be protecting anything too much significance, it can be severe. So that's all about the remember me feature, how we can intercept the cookies from username and password very easily with like a simple inspect element feature, or even a tool called Boutsuit to intercept the password and even decode in these tools. So that's all about the remember me vulnerability that you can exploit. So in this lecture, we will be talking about insufficient access control. So insufficient access control is a basic web application vulnerability that still leads to compromises, small oversight, or simply not taking things through that can lead to some problems such as account takeover or sensitive data being stolen. Access control problems are commonly encountered, and they often pose concretely security risk and critical vulnerabilities. Since the design and management of access control is a complex and dynamic problem, and also errors that are potentially high, therefore access control design and decision have to be made by human, not technology. While normal user can perform only regular actions such as money transfer, administrator can perform actions that require more privileges such as deleting and modifying the users. There are various factors to consider when implementing authentication into web applications such as password security, account recovery control, password reset control, account permission, and session management. Numerous frameworks are designed to handle authentication and authorization that plug into popular languages and also web application frameworks. Popular frameworks are known for high-strength security. However, implementing this framework requires consideration of several factors to ensure that they are securely configured. What are the access control vulnerabilities? Access control are designed to prevent user from acting outside the intended permission. User can take action beyond the scope of their authorization permission if there are vulnerabilities in these controls or if they do not exist. This may allow attacker to steal information about other user, modify data, and perform action as other users. Two common names for splitting access control vulnerabilities into categories are horizontal privilege escalation. It occurs especially when a user can perform an action or access the data of another user with the same level of permission. And then vertical privilege escalation occurs when a user can perform an action or access data that requires a level of access beyond their role. So these access control are most commonly popular for WASP top 10 web application vulnerability list. So access control issues are typically not detectable by dynamic vulnerability scanning and static source code review. Tools as they review are that require an understanding of how certain pieces of data are used within the web application. Manual testing still is the best way to detect missing or broken access control. So let's talk about the impact and risk of access control. So broken access control can put into application at a risk of data breach, usually result in a loss of confidentiality and integrity. An adversary can steal information accessed by the user and an application that manipulate data by performing action that various users role can perform within the application, and it is in certain circumstances that compromise the web server. Data manipulation may allow account hijacking, theft if the application deals with currency or tangible goods, and control of system or service the application monitors. Further attack against the web server and infrastructure may be possible given the nature of the application. So let's talk about access control attack scenarios. So a banking application has vertical permission issues. Building on the things like the banking application has a customer support role that allow user to support agent to help customer with account issues. The customer support role has the ability to search a database of all customers which is not available to customers. Then the attacker discovered that this feature exists though some comments left in the web page source code. Then the attacker crafted request based on the information to search for the customer database. And then this application responds with a list of 100 customers from the application database. In addition to manipulating a request parameter and URL path, exploiting commonly involves tampering of metadata such as token, cookies, and coarse misconfiguration. So let's talk about the remediation. There are variety of access control models to choose from when developing application. So once the model has been selected, it should be kept throughout the development and testing to minimize the security concern. These models are like role-based access control, mandatory access control, permission-based access control, and discriminatory access control. These models are included with these but are not limited to this. So each model has its own pros and cons, but the selection of the model will depend on the several factors including the application's primary purpose and level of security required and design. Remediation of access control vulnerabilities will typically involve changes of the functionality of the application code. So these changes may include adding server-side check to verify that user attempt to access or change the data, that the proper clearances are changing default behavior, or that access or modification is prohibited unless explicitly permitted. So that's all about you need to know about insufficient access control. So in this lecture we'll be talking about privilege escalation. So privilege escalation is a type of network attack that used to gain the unauthorized access to system within a security parameter. Attackers start by finding weak points in organization defense and gaining access to a system. In many cases, that first point of penetration will not grant attackers with the level of access or data that they need. They will then attempt privilege escalation to gain more permission or obtain access to additional and more sensitive systems. In some cases, attackers attempt to do privilege escalation to find the doors wide open and inadequate security controls, or fail to follow the principle of least privilege, with users having more privilege than they actually need. In other cases, attacker exploits software vulnerabilities or use specific techniques to overcome an operating system's permission mechanism. So privilege escalation is a very well-known concept within information security. And what we are really talking about here is the ability for someone to elevate their privilege to that a level higher that we should legitimately have. So we actually saw what happened earlier on in our parameter tempering, but I want to recap it here in the context or content of access control. So here we will do this again. So let's go to my account. So I am logged into my account, as you can see, user as Akash. So let's go account, edit profile. So I am into this page now. So let's go and type inspect, and let's move up to this. So let's bigger our screen so that you can see. Now this is the parameter tempering as we saw earlier, but it is also privilege escalation because I will just made myself admin. So what you have to do now is you have to edit some code. So as you can see in here, we are now not as admin but as user. So we will put ourselves as admin. So edit as HTML value, let's true, value as true, and let's save. As you can see, we have put ourselves in admin now. So this is the parameter tempering, and it is also called privilege escalation because I just made myself as admin. So these changes has persisted through to the database, and whether it's modifying hidden fields or using that mesh assignment risk that we saw earlier as well, this is actually pretty similar, as I now have all the rights to do what I shouldn't have because just a couple of parameter tempering I gain myself as admin, and as you can see I can also manage users and all of those. So if there is efficient access control, remember sufficient access control to ensure that someone cannot assign themselves to a role above that what they need and what they should have allowed in their hands. So if they can do that, then that's the way to lead some sort of attack like this. As you can see, as a user I can gain access to as admin as well with privilege escalation. And as we say here, in elevating themselves of way up to the admin, they may also exploit other risks in order to escalate their privileges. So for example, a SQL injection risk would be a great way to elevate your privilege because you could directly change the underlying database and it simply go through what the set is there, and this is the admin using a SQL statement append to a piece of malicious or untrusted data. There are many ways to elevate or escalate the privilege, such as you take on rights that you simply should never have before. So for this, really, when it comes to the defense for handling the untrusted data, and that is not to trust anything always that's validated on the server. So in this example, we touch on the fact that attributes should not be binding at all on the underlying model. You simply should not be able to set this as an admin flag remotely. If it was a scenario where you could not genuinely provide access level for someone, you don't want them to elevate their privilege beyond what they should have need as a business rule or business rule of the server, which validates that the information provided by the client. So remember that the untrusted data is actually valid and it hasn't been tampered with, that it is allowed that the verification must exist. So that's what it's all about. privilege escalation. So in this lecture, we'll do SQL map to test website for SQL injection vulnerability. So where can you use SQL map? So if you observe a web URL that is a form of like this. So this is the web URL that we'll be using on SQL map. So where the get parameter is in bold in this website, and the website may be vulnerable to this mode of SQL injection, and an attacker may be able to gain access to information in the database. So furthermore, SQL map works when it is in PHP based. So you can use any PHP database that you want, but we'll be using this one. Also you can also test this one. This is for testing purpose also. So first use SQL map. So simply just type sudo apt get install SQL map, and it will automatically install SQL map. But as I already have SQL map installed, so I'll just simply type SQL map, and as you can see, you can use any of these command you want, -d, -u, -l, all of those. So we'll be using -u. What does -u do? So it will use the shell command. So let's use SQL map -u -u. So this is the web address, this one. So just simply copy this and paste it in here, and just type -dbs means database, and just press enter. As you can see, it scanned and it found couple of the available database in here, which are acquired and also information underscore schema. And also you can get all of those information in here, like as I previously said, it uses get. So this is the artist one, as you can see. So this is using Linux, Ubuntu, and the PHP version. You can see MySQL version and all of those. So let's use other command. So what command can you use? So let's use now let's go further and list this database, what's in there. So just type -D, then use this, which is acquired, ACCUART, and we'll also use the tables that are into these databases. So we'll list the information about the table that present in this particular database, and we want to see whether we can access the table. So just press enter. As you can see, it retrieves all of those. Do you want to use common table existing check? Yes, press Y. So it will see and it will list all of the tables that is into this database, which is acquired. Okay, it will take some time, I think, running in a single thread mode. So let's pause and wait until it's done. So as you can see, it found all of the tables that are into this database, which is acquired. So it takes some time, like couple of minutes. So now, as you can see, we have 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. We have 8 tables that have been retrieved. So now we definitely know that this website is vulnerable. So what we want to do now is we want to list the information about the column of a particular table. So if you want to view a column of a particular table, we can use a command using -t to specify the table name and -column to query to use the column name. So we'll try to access this label called artist. So just type SQL map -u and the link that we previously copied, then -d accurate, then we'll use -t, which means for the table, this table, and we'll also use -t table artist t artist artist, then you'll use the column commands. So CEO LU and S. So as you can see in here, we can access the information of a specific column in here. So it result in a couple of artist, which is etc, type text, which is name, and artist ID is integer. So now we will dump the data from the column. So similarly, we can use the information which is in a specific column by using the command which is -c, and it can be used to specify the multiple column name. So we'll use this one, which is name. So let's use this. So just type minus column. So after -t artist, we will use -c for this. So just type -c, then use the artist, which is name is name, then we will use dump. And as you can see, we retrieve the data. We can see that we have accessed the data from the database. Similarly, in such vulnerable website, we can literally explore through the database to extract the information. So in this artist name, which is name, we have this data. So we got all of those information or result in here. So also you can, so that's how we can, I think, use or gather or extract information from the database. So in this way, you can use on different websites as well, different website that uses PHP. So these are the files. That is this for a CSV file, as you can see, table CSV. So that's how we can get a database information if it uses a PHP. So that's how this works actually. So that's all for it in this lecture.